Hello, and welcome back to Speak English Daily.
Hi, everyone. We are very happy to see you here today.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Speak English Daily, your calm little space to learn real English through real conversations. I'm Anna.
And I'm Mike. And before we even begin, I need to say something because Anna already disagreed with me before we pressed record.
I didn't disagree, I reacted strongly. There's a difference.
That reaction sounded very much like disagreement.
Because what you said was bold and slightly dangerous.
Dangerous? That feels dramatic.
You said, and I quote, that someone can look amazing and still become unattractive in a few seconds if they have no confidence.
Yes, I stand by that.
You said it like it was a universal truth, like you had conducted a full scientific study on human attraction.
I don't need a lab. I have life experience.
Your life experience includes getting nervous when ordering coffee if the menu has too many options.
That is not relevant to this discussion.
It is very relevant. We are talking about confidence, and I am bringing real-world evidence.
So now I'm being studied?
Publicly, for educational purposes.
This is already going well.
Welcome to today's episode.
All right, jokes aside, this topic is actually more interesting than it sounds at first, because people often say looks matter, and they do.
Of course they do. We're not going to pretend people don't notice beauty. That would be unrealistic.
People notice appearance very quickly, sometimes in a second, sometimes even faster than that.
But what happens after that first moment, that's where things start to shift.
Yes, because sometimes someone looks incredible, and then they speak, or they move, or they interact with others, and something feels off.
It can feel distant, uncomfortable, or even tense, and suddenly the whole impression changes.
And it can change very fast.
Painfully fast.
One sentence can do it.
One tone of voice can do it.
One awkward moment can do it.
And then there's the opposite situation, which I think is even more interesting.
The one where someone doesn't stand out immediately.
But then they start talking and everything changes.
They seem relaxed. They seem present. They make people feel at ease.
And suddenly, they become the person everyone remembers.
That's the moment where attraction becomes something deeper than just appearance.
Yes. And that's why this conversation is not only about beauty, it's about something bigger.
It's about presence.
It's about energy.
It's about how someone feels to be around.
And also how they feel about themselves.
Which is where confidence enters the picture.
And here's the question we're exploring today. Is confidence more attractive than beauty?
And we're not asking this in a shallow way.
No, we're asking what actually lasts.
What holds attention after the first impression fades.
What makes someone memorable?
What makes someone feel magnetic?
And also, what makes someone lose that attraction almost instantly?
That part is very real.
So we want you to think about this with us, in your real life, not in theory.
What feels more attractive to you?
Beauty?
Confidence?
Or both?
And please don't escape with, it depends.
That answer has saved too many people from making a decision. Today, we want honesty.
Also, just a quick note for you as a learner, this is a B2 level conversation.
So you'll hear more natural opinions, slightly longer sentences, and more expressive language.
You don't need to understand every single word.
Focus on the feeling. Follow the meaning.
Let the conversation carry you.
And later, we'll walk through some of the key words we use today. So by the end, you'll have better ways to describe attraction, confidence, and first impressions.
Instead of just saying, I don't know, they just have something.
Even though that sentence somehow explains everything in real life.
It really does.
So let's begin properly.
Anna, when you think about attraction in real life, what lasts longer?
I think beauty gets attention quickly, but confidence stays longer.
That's interesting.
Beauty makes people look at you. Confidence makes them stay without even noticing why.
That feels very true.
So if we stay with that idea for a moment, beauty gets attention quickly, confidence stays longer, I feel like that already explains a lot about how attraction works in real life.
It does, because attention and connection are not the same thing.
Yes, that's such an important difference. Attention is fast. It's almost automatic.
And connection takes time. It builds.
When someone walks into a room and looks very attractive, people notice immediately.
That's the classic moment when someone turns heads.
Right. And if someone turns heads, it means people look at them straight away. There's an instant reaction.
You don't even think about it. Your brain just goes, "Oh, that person stands out."
And there's nothing wrong with that. It's human.
I think sometimes people try to act like they don't notice appearance at all.
Yes, like they want to sound deep or philosophical.
But let's be honest, if someone walks in looking very polished, stylish, or striking, people will notice.
That first glance has power. It creates curiosity.
It opens the door.
But the problem is, it doesn't always know what to do after that.
That's where things can fall apart.
Because after those first few seconds, people start feeling something, not just seeing something.
And feelings are much harder to control than appearance.
You can choose your clothes, you can prepare your look.
But the way you carry yourself, the way you speak, the way you react, that reveals something deeper.
Yes, and that's where confidence starts to matter more. Because confidence is not just visible, it's almost felt.
That's a good way to say it. Felt.
You can feel when someone is comfortable in themselves,
And you can also feel when someone is not.
even if you can't explain it clearly. Yes, like you meet someone and you think, I don't know what it is, but something feels a bit tense.
Or the opposite. I don't know why, but I feel relaxed around this person.
And that shift can completely change how attractive someone feels.
Which is interesting because it means attraction is not fixed.
Not at all. It's moving all the time.
Someone can start very high in your mind because of their appearance.
And then slowly go down as you interact with them.
Or the opposite. Someone can start quietly.
And then grow stronger in your perception.
I've had that happen so many times.
Same. There are people I didn't notice at all in the beginning.
And then after a few conversations, I couldn't stop noticing them.
Yes, because something about their energy kept pulling attention back.
And it wasn't about looks anymore.
No, it was about how they made the space feel.
That's the part people often underestimate.
They think attraction is something you see,
But a big part of it is something you experience.
and confidence plays a huge role in that experience.
Because confident people don't seem like they're asking for approval all the time.
Yes, they don't feel like they're trying to prove something every second.
And that creates a very different atmosphere,
It feels calmer, more stable.
which is actually quite rare.
Especially now, when everyone seems a little rushed or distracted.
Or slightly stressed all the time.
So when someone shows up with a calm, steady energy,
It stands out in a completely different way.
not loud, not dramatic, but noticeable.
And I think that's where confidence becomes more powerful than beauty.
Because beauty might make people look once,
But confidence makes people look again
and stay,
and listen.
and remember.
There's also something else here. Confidence doesn't compete for attention in the same way.
What do you mean?
Beauty can sometimes feel like it's trying to win a moment.
Like a quick impact.
Yes, but confidence feels like it's comfortable taking its time.
That's true. It doesn't rush.
And that changes how people respond to it.
Because people relax around it,
And when people relax, they open up more.
which creates better conversations.
And better conversations create stronger impressions.
So it becomes this kind of cycle.
Exactly. Confidence creates comfort. Comfort creates connection, and connection creates attraction.
That's such a clear way to explain it.
And this is also very important for English learners.
Yes, because a lot of learners think attraction or even communication depends on perfect English.
But in reality, people respond more to how you speak than how perfect your grammar is.
If you speak with fear, hesitation, and constant apology,
People feel that tension.
But if you speak with a bit of calm, even with simple words,
People feel more comfortable.
and they focus on the message, not the mistakes,
So in a way, confidence changes how your English is received,
not just how it sounds,
which is actually very encouraging.
because confidence is something you can build
Slowly, step by step,
through small conversations.
through little moments where you choose to speak instead of staying silent.
And over time, that becomes part of your presence.
And presence is what people remember.
Not perfect sentences,
Not perfect pronunciation.
but how they felt while talking to you.
So if we bring it back to the main question,
Beauty or confidence.
I think beauty may start the story.
But confidence decides how the story continues.
That's a strong way to put it.
You know what really makes this topic clear for me? Real situations. Not ideas, not theories, just moments where you actually feel the difference.
Yes, because once you've experienced it, you can't unsee it.
I remember something very clearly from a work event a couple of years ago. It was one of those slightly formal gatherings where everyone is trying to look their best.
Already sounds stressful.
It was a little, and there was this woman who walked in and you could feel the reaction in the room instantly.
One of those people who turns heads the second they enter.
Exactly. The outfit was perfect, the hair was perfect, everything was very polished. You could almost hear people thinking, wow.
That kind of presence that feels almost cinematic.
Yes, like she had stepped out of a film, and naturally people were curious. A few of us ended up talking to her later.
And this is where things usually become interesting.
Very, because on the surface, everything still looked perfect. She was polite, she smiled, she said the right things.
So nothing obviously wrong.
No, nothing you could point at and say, that's the problem. But something felt empty.
Empty how?
The conversation didn't flow. It felt like every sentence was just placed there, like it had no real energy behind it.
That feeling when you're talking but it doesn't feel alive?
Yes, that's the best way to describe it. You're speaking, but there's no warmth, no curiosity, no real connection.
Almost like talking to someone who is present physically but not emotionally.
Exactly. And after a few minutes, you realize you're not drawn into the conversation. You're just there.
That's such a strange shift because at first all the attention is on them,
And then slowly that attention fades.
even though their appearance hasn't changed at all.
Yes, nothing about how they look has changed, but how they feel to be around has changed completely.
That's such a powerful example.
It stayed with me because I remember thinking, why does this feel so flat? There was no spark, no sense of ease.
And that affects how attractive someone feels over time.
Very quickly, you go from wow to in a matter of minutes.
That is a very honest way to say it.
And then something interesting happened later that same evening.
There's always a second example, isn't there?
There has to be. Otherwise, it's just a sad story.
Fair point.
So later, I ended up talking to someone else, and at first, she didn't stand out in the same dramatic way.
Not the turn heads type.
No, she looked nice, friendly, very normal. Nothing that made the whole room stop and stare.
So no immediate spotlight.
None. But the moment she started speaking, something shifted.
In what way?
She was relaxed, not trying too hard. She laughed easily, she listened carefully, and she responded in a way that made you feel like she was really there with you.
That kind of presence where you feel seen.
Yes, and it changes everything. Suddenly, the conversation feels easy.
And you don't feel like you need to perform.
Exactly. You can just be yourself. And the more she spoke, the more people seemed to gather around her without even realizing it.
That's always fascinating to watch. People just drift closer.
Yes, like they're pulled in gently, not pushed.
That's a very different kind of attraction.
And after a while, she became the person everyone remembered from that event.
Not the one who looked the most striking at first.
No, but the one who felt the most natural to be around.
That says a lot.
It really does, because it shows that attraction is not only about what catches your eye.
It's about what holds your attention.
And even more than that, what makes you want to stay.
That second example feels more powerful in the long run.
Definitely, because it creates a memory, not just a moment.
And people don't talk about that enough.
They don't. We often focus on first impressions, but we forget about lasting impressions.
And lasting impressions are built through interaction,
Through energy, through comfort, through presence.
not just through appearance.
Exactly. And I think many English learners experience something similar, even if it's in a different context.
Yes, like when you meet someone who speaks perfect English,
But the conversation still feels a bit distant.
and then you meet someone with simpler English,
But they're relaxed, open, and engaged.
and you end up enjoying that conversation much more.
Because the feeling matters more than the perfection.
That's such an important point.
So these examples are not just about attraction in a romantic sense.
They apply to everyday interactions,
Work, friendships, social situations.
even small conversations.
And once you notice this pattern, you start to understand why confidence plays such a big role.
Because confidence creates that ease,
And ease creates connection.
and connection makes people stay.
So if we look at those examples closely, the difference wasn't really about appearance. It was about something less visible, but much more powerful.
Yes, it was about how those people carried themselves.
And that brings us to something we mentioned earlier, presence.
Presence is such an interesting word because it's hard to define, but you feel it immediately.
It's the impact someone has when they are around you.
Not just how they look, but how they make the space feel.
Yes, some people walk into a room and everything feels a bit calmer.
Others walk in and the energy becomes tense or uncomfortable.
And it's not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's very subtle.
That's why presence is not about being the center of attention.
No, it's about how comfortable someone is being seen.
That's a powerful idea.
Because when someone is comfortable in themselves, it shows in small ways.
In the way they stand,
In the way they pause before speaking.
in the way they look at people without rushing or avoiding eye contact,
Yes, and those small signals create a strong impression.
even before they say anything important.
That's where confidence becomes visible without words.
And I think this connects closely to another word, poise.
Poise is one of those qualities that feels very attractive, but also very quiet.
It's calm, controlled confidence.
Not dramatic, not loud, not trying too hard.
Just steady.
Like someone who doesn't feel the need to prove themselves every second.
And that steadiness makes other people feel more relaxed.
It's almost like still water. It doesn't need to move a lot to show depth.
That's a beautiful image.
Thank you. I'm having a thoughtful day.
I can see that.
But it's true. When someone has poise, they don't rush their words.
They don't interrupt themselves.
They don't fill every silence with nervous energy.
And that makes their presence feel stronger.
Because it feels grounded.
And grounding is rare.
Very rare. Especially now, when people are constantly distracted.
Or thinking about the next thing instead of the current moment.
So when someone is fully present, it stands out in a quiet but powerful way.
And this is where body language becomes really important.
Yes, because your body is always communicating, even when you're silent.
You might be saying one thing with your words,
And something completely different with your posture.
like saying, I'm confident, while your shoulders are closing in.
Or saying, I'm relaxed, while your hands are tense.
People notice that, even if they don't think about it consciously.
And that's why confidence often shows up physically before it shows up verbally.
You see it before you hear it.
I actually noticed something like this recently in a small coffee shop.
I like where this is going already.
There was a man standing in line. Nothing about him was particularly striking at first.
So not someone who immediately turns heads.
No, simple clothes, very normal style, nothing flashy.
And yet you noticed him.
Yes, and it took me a moment to understand why. He was just calm.
Calm in what way?
He wasn't rushing. He wasn't checking his phone every few seconds. He stood there like he was fully present in that moment.
That already makes him different from most people.
Exactly. And when he spoke to the barista, he did it slowly, clearly, with a small smile.
That kind of interaction feels very human.
Yes, and it made the whole space feel less hurried. Even the people around him seemed to relax a little.
That's fascinating how one person's energy can affect others.
And that's what confidence can do. It can lower the emotional pressure in a space,
Without saying anything special.
without trying to impress anyone.
Just by being comfortable.
And that's the key. He didn't look like he needed anything from the room.
He was not asking for approval.
He was not performing.
He was just there.
And that made him stand out more than people who were trying much harder.
That's such an important observation.
Because it shows that confidence is not about being the loudest or the most noticeable.
It's about being at ease with yourself.
And that ease becomes visible through presence, poise, and body language,
And people feel it immediately.
even if they can't explain it.
Which brings us to something deeper, I think.
So, if we go a little deeper beyond what we can see, I think this is where the topic becomes more emotional.
Yes, because confidence is not only about posture or voice, it's also about what's happening inside a person.
And sometimes someone can look amazing on the outside and still feel very uncertain on the inside.
That contrast can be quite strong.
When someone feels secure in who they are, we often describe them as self-assured.
Which means they trust themselves. They don't need constant reassurance from others.
And that kind of energy feels very peaceful to be around, because they're not fighting themselves.
That's such an important point. They are not in a constant internal argument,
And people can feel that calmness.
even without words.
On the other hand, someone can appear very confident at first, but underneath they feel insecure.
And insecure means they doubt themselves or they don't feel stable inside,
They might worry a lot about how others see them.
or need approval to feel okay,
And that inner tension can slowly become visible.
even if their appearance is still impressive.
I remember someone like that from a course I attended a few years ago.
What was it like?
She was honestly one of the most beautiful people in the room, the kind of person people notice immediately.
So, strong first impression.
Very strong. People would look at her twice, but when you spoke to her, something felt different.
In what way?
Every compliment made her uncomfortable. She would quickly change the subject or laugh it off.
That already says a lot.
And during conversations, she seemed tense, like she was expecting something to go wrong.
Almost waiting for judgment.
Yes, like she was preparing herself for rejection, even when there was no reason for it.
That must have affected how people experienced her.
It did. After a while, you stopped focusing on how beautiful she was.
And started noticing how uneasy she felt.
Exactly, and it created a kind of sadness in the interaction.
That's quite powerful.
It stayed with me because it made me realize something very clearly. External beauty can decorate the surface.
But it cannot calm the inside.
Only self-acceptance can do that.
And that's where confidence becomes something meaningful.
Because it's not just given, it's built.
Through experience, through small moments, through learning to trust yourself.
And that's encouraging, especially for English learners.
Yes, because many learners think they need to reach a perfect level before they can feel confident.
But confidence often grows while you're still learning.
Through mistakes, through effort, through showing up again and again.
Those small wins matter.
They slowly build that feeling of, I can handle this,
And over time, that becomes visible.
which makes confidence feel more real than something you were simply born with.
But then there's another concern people often have.
Yes, the moment someone hears all this, they start thinking, what if confidence turns into arrogance?
That fear is very common.
And understandable.
But confidence and arrogance are very different.
Completely different.
A confident person usually makes others feel comfortable.
An arrogant person often creates tension.
That's a clear difference.
And we often say someone can give off a certain energy.
Yes, and to give off means to create or send out a feeling or impression,
Confidence tends to give off calmness, respect, and stability.
while arrogance gives off pressure, superiority, or even discomfort.
It can feel like someone is trying too hard to prove something.
Yes, like they need everyone to see how important they are.
That energy feels heavy.
Very heavy.
Confidence feels light.
Because it doesn't need to push itself.
It just exists.
Arrogance, on the other hand, feels like it's always asking for attention.
Almost like it's hungry.
Hungry is the perfect word.
And sometimes it enters a room like it has already prepared a speech about how impressive it is,
And practiced it many times.
with dramatic pauses.
And imaginary applause.
That image is too real.
But it helps explain the difference.
It does, because truly confident people often have something else, charisma.
And charisma is not about being loud or showing off.
It's a natural charm that draws people in,
It often comes from warmth, ease, and authenticity.
from being comfortable enough to let others feel comfortable too.
And that's why charismatic people don't make others feel smaller,
They make others feel more relaxed.
which is a very different experience from arrogance.
So, confidence is not about thinking you are better than others
It's about knowing you are enough.
and allowing others to feel the same around you.
That creates a very different kind of attraction.
One that feels safe, open, and real.
There's one more layer to this that I think brings everything together. Some people don't just look attractive, they change the feeling of a whole room.
Yes, they affect the atmosphere without trying to control it.
You walk into a space and it feels normal. Then they arrive and suddenly people seem more relaxed.
Conversations become easier.
People laugh more.
Even silence feels more comfortable.
That kind of person feels magnetic.
And when someone is magnetic, people are naturally drawn to them.
Not because they are demanding attention.
But because being around them feels good.
And that feeling is hard to ignore.
I've seen this happen many times. Someone who doesn't look particularly striking at first.
But after a few minutes, everyone is paying attention to them.
Not in a forced way.
In a very natural way.
And it comes back to everything we've been discussing.
Presence.
Ease.
Confidence.
The ability to make others feel comfortable.
So if we return to the question,
Is confidence more attractive than beauty?
I think beauty can open the door.
But confidence is what makes people want to stay.
And more than that, it changes how people experience you,
It turns a moment into something memorable.
which is what most people are really looking for, even if they don't say it directly.
And that's why confidence reaches further than appearance.
Now, before we finish, let's slow things down a little and go through some useful words and phrases from today's conversation.
Yes, listen first, then repeat with us.
Let's start with the phrase, turn heads.
If someone turns heads, they attract attention immediately. People notice them right away.
For example, she turned heads when she entered the meeting.
Or a strong sense of style can turn heads quickly.
Repeat, turn heads.
Turn heads.
Next, presence.
Presence is the feeling or impact a person has when they're around others.
For example, he has a calm presence that makes people feel at ease.
Or confidence can give someone a stronger presence.
Repeat, presence.
Presence.
Next, poise.
Poise means calm, controlled confidence.
For example, she answered the question with real poise.
Or poise can make someone stand out in a quiet way.
Repeat, poise.
Poise.
Next, carry yourself well.
If you carry yourself well, you present yourself with confidence through your posture and behavior.
For example, he speaks softly, but he carries himself well.
Or people notice when someone carries themselves well, even without words.
Repeat, carry yourself well.
Carry yourself well.
Next, self-assured.
If someone is self-assured, they feel secure in who they are.
For example, she sounded self-assured during the presentation.
Or a self-assured person often feels easy to talk to.
Repeat, self-assured.
Self-assured.
Now, insecure.
If someone feels insecure, they lack confidence and often doubt themselves.
For example, he seemed confident at first, but later he appeared insecure.
Or insecurity can affect how people communicate.
Repeat. Insecure.
Insecure.
Next, stand out.
To stand out means to be more noticeable than others in a positive way.
For example, her attitude helped her stand out during the interview.
Or confidence can help you stand out more than appearance.
Repeat. Stand out.
Stand out.
Next, give off.
To give off means to create or send out a feeling or impression.
For example, he gives off a calm and friendly energy.
Or nervousness can give off a very different feeling.
Repeat. Give off.
Give off.
Next, charisma.
Charisma is a natural charm that attracts people.
For example, she has a quiet charisma that draws people in.
Or charisma often comes from confidence and warmth.
Repeat. Charisma.
Charisma.
And finally, magnetic.
If someone is magnetic, people are naturally drawn to them.
For example, there was something magnetic about his personality.
Or confidence can make someone feel magnetic over time.
Repeat. Magnetic.
Magnetic.
And that brings us to the end of today's conversation.
What this really shows is that attraction is not only about what we see first.
It's about what we feel after we stay.
Confidence changes that feeling.
It makes interactions warmer, more human, more real.
And the best part is, it's something you can build.
Slowly, through experience, through small moments, through allowing yourself to show up.
So this is not just about attraction.
It's about becoming more comfortable in your own presence.
And letting that comfort shape how others experience you.
Take care of your English.
And take care of your confidence.
This is Anna.
This is Mike.
And you've been listening to Speak English Daily.
See you next time.